Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming out. Welcome to Real Ideas, a series of industry and film conversations from the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. My name is Samir. I'm the Industry and Education Programmer here at the festival. Today's presentation is called Journey Back, Exploring Origin in Filmmaking and Creating Character Out of Home. Today we'll be spotlighting the films of Fawzia Mirza and of Zarrar Kahn and their journey of revisiting their roots in Pakistan while making their feature debut. We're so happy to have both of them here and to have them chat with Shezi. For many of us, and for me especially, these two films are so special, seeing how much of your voice and how much of everything you love are in the films, how much you leaned in comedy, how much you got to lean with horror is very special. And I absolutely love seeing all the touches of Bollywood and seeing kind of where you both maybe grew up or where you both kind of visit when you go back to Pakistan. That was really lovely to see. And we're so happy to have you talk more about it with Shezi as well. Before I begin, I do want to say that Real Asian is committed to more abundance and complexity in Asian and Asian diasporic film and media arts. However, while we reckon with our complicated histories of cultural or linguistic displacement, it is important for us to acknowledge the ways we ourselves as settlers have benefited from Canadian government displacement of Indigenous peoples. At Real Asian, we reckon openly with our responsibility to this land and its caretakers. We recognize that we are still in a time of great upheaval and need, that the disposition of Indigenous communities and loss of their language and culture is not a thing of the past, but it's ongoing. We honor the longstanding work of organizers, creatives, and communities that continue to give us hope, language, and possibility. Real Asian's offices and activities are located on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat nations. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty of collective responsibility for the protection and sharing of land, water, and resources. Before we begin, I do want to say a huge thank you to our public funders, Telefilm Canada, Canada Council for the Arts, the Province of Ontario, Ontario Arts Council, Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Trillium Foundation, Ontario Creates, and Ontario Cultural Attraction Fund. We'd also like to give a big thank you to our Real Idea sponsors, Ontario Creates, Crave, Warner Brothers Discovery Access Canada, the CBC, Canada Media Fund, and the Writers Guild of Canada. And a big thank you to our community supporters Inside Out, POV Films, and the South Asian Filmmakers Federation. I'll now give this over to Shezi, who will be introducing the two lovely speakers today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Samir. I'm so excited to be here today with all of you and these wonderful filmmakers. I'm Shehrezade Mian, producer and founder of Markhor Pictures, and as Samir mentioned, today we're going to be having a discussion with Fawzia Mirza and Zarrar Kahn about their impressive feature debuts, Queen of My Dreams and In Flames, within the context of exploring origin in filmmaking and creating a character out of home. We'll have time for a brief question and answer session at the end of the panel, so please save your questions for the end. And let's get straight into it. So, to just give our audience some context, can you first of all give us a really brief overview of the years that you lived in Pakistan, for how long, and when did you migrate to Canada?
Zarrar's looking at me, so I will begin. I've never lived in Pakistan. I've visited maybe 12 to 15 times. The most I've ever lived there was during summer holidays, so 3 months.
Same. My family migrated to Canada when I was 9, and then we moved back when I was 15, and then I moved back when I was 19, and then I moved back when I was 24, and then I moved back when I was 30. So I'm kind of split right down the middle, which is why I often struggle with being called to diaspora, because I feel like I'm well planted in between both worlds.
I'm gonna touch on that. While I was in the Uber on the way here, I was looking at the word diaspora, and I want to mention off the bat that I'm gonna use that word, but even as someone who spent half her life in Pakistan and then migrated to Canada by herself, I don't know if I like calling myself diaspora, because I feel like I'm Pakistani. So just take it with a grain of salt, because I have no other word to refer to. So this next question is something that I struggle with a lot, and I'm really curious to hear your answers about it. when trying to present specific socio-cultural Pakistani issues to the West, I've often found that we really need to give a lot of context so that our films are more palatable or accessible to Western audiences. Whereas usually if we're making films purely for Pakistanis, we wouldn't necessarily make some of those choices. Can both of you talk a little bit about whether this was a challenge for you at all with your films? And in addition, like, how do you give such context without seeming too on the nose or over expository or needing to have multiple subplots to get the essence of something across or the depth of something across?
I mean, I feel like there's so many layers to that question, but I guess, I mean, the process of writing this screenplay for me was both, the writing portion of it was about, I don't know, it started probably in 2017. So what is that, like, there was about 5 years. And then rewriting in the edit, which is essential. But before that, it was like a 10+ year journey of figuring out who I am. And so I would say in terms of deciding what to put on screen, I would say The Queen of My Dreams is a reflection of my complete liberation. I, as a queer person, as a Muslim, as a South Asian, my parents were born in India pre-partition, born in Canada, have citizenship in Canada and the United States. I needed to create something that expressed very honestly a world that made sense to me. And the question in the center of it is, how do we become who we are? And that was a question that I asked myself, but to find the answer, I had to ask it about my mother. And I don't have the answer, so I came up with it. And so the film is fantasy, and that's partially the liberation of it, is that you may not have the answers, but for me to find that complete joy, I have to have peace.
I could just hear Fawzia talk like all day. Like, it's always a pleasure to be up here with you.
I love being on stage and sharing space and mics with you.
Same. Yeah. What was the question?
It's a bit of a loaded question. So I found often that when we're trying to tackle specifically very Pakistani themes, like there's a lot of nuance, you know, like I'll give you an example. We come from very collectivist communities, which means that, like, you know, we value the family unit as a whole more than the individual, whereas in North America, people really value like individual values. It's all about what's good for a person. So that's why in our culture, you see a lot of things like, you know, when women are going through abuse, like they won't speak up because they're worried about what the family's going to think and how it's going to impact them. And I find that this is difficult sometimes for North American audiences to understand, along with a host of other things, you know, like being queer in Pakistan has got a lot more connotations to it than I would say maybe perhaps like being queer in the West. So my question is, when trying to express the weight of these differences, how do you give context to Western audiences when making your films, and is this challenging for you? Because in my head, I feel like, you know, if I'm trying to present this issue, I need to give them like the entire sense of the issue. And I see it kind of, you know, a bit in both of your films. Like Fawzia, there's a scene in the on the plane where your lead character asks for alcohol and she's denied it, and then a fellow passenger chimes in and says, well, you know, in the 60s, like, alcohol was legal. Like, a Pakistani would pretty much know that, but like Westerners wouldn't, and it's important to have that context. So, you know, circling back to what I wanted to know, like, can you talk a bit about whether this was a challenge for you and how do you give context without seeming too on the nose or over expository?
I think, at least for my filmmaking, I kind of benefit from Pakistan being mostly notorious. So a lot of people have heard of Pakistan. Have they heard good things? That's another question. But at least when I've traveled, and I've had the privilege to travel quite a bit through my filmmaking career, because I didn't go to film school, I learned from international labs. You know, everyone was like, oh, you're from Pakistan. And then I'd say I'm from Karachi, and they're like, ooh, Karachi. So it's kind of really using filmmaking as a tool to upend those preconceived notions of the city and the country that I love and have a complicated relationship with. And then in the stories that I've been choosing to tell, which are all set in Karachi and all speaking to communities that even if you live in Karachi, you might have never heard of them. And it's also explaining to our own society that these are all communities that deserve to have their voices amplified. So it's really just rooted in all the characters and the stories that I've been telling. And I think what I love about cinema is it's a way to travel in the world of a world that hasn't been explored. And when COVID was happening, all I was doing was watching international cinema because I really missed traveling. So I discovered cinema from Senegal, from Italy, from parts of the world that I really wanted to go to. So I think it's baked into the DNA of the kind of cinema that I like, where if the story is really rooted in a personal experience, I think there's a lot of shared humanity that allows people inroads beyond subtitles, which is why I'm probably going to be doing a silent film soon. There just won't be any dialogue.
Fawzia, I'm not sure if you want to touch on that again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's a great example in The Queen of My Dreams of the character saying, being told, oh, things used to be different in 1969. I think if a character does it, it doesn't feel exposition-y in that overt way if it's true to that character. I did.
And it's so true to that character.
And it's so true.
Everyone would be like, remember when alcohol was legal?
No. Yeah, right? And they're like, I don't. It's too hard to remember.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a...
Did you ever feel there was a point where you're like, oh, I have to explain this so that this part of my audience is able to understand what I'm trying to get across?
I think that there's probably stuff that I kept revising out when it started to feel, and I don't know how else to say that, right? Like sometimes it's just a feeling of, I know I'm doing that thing right now. But sometimes you write it because it needs it when you're writing it. And then when you get closer to making it, you're like, wait, do we need this? Or on the day, you're like, don't say that. Or let's do a take without that and see what happens. Or in the edit, you don't include that part of the scene. And so you have all those opportunities to remove it. Like, do we need this explanation or is it just okay? And I think some of it, when I talk about the liberation of it all, there's a scene in The Queen of My Dreams where there's a lota, the watering can, the Muslim bidet, the classic. And, there's so much trauma growing up in the West associated with having a hand shower by your toilet.
Or the water bottle.
Or the water bottle. Like,
the water bottle is the worst.
Yeah, why does your mom carry that? Where is she going? Why did she take so long in the bathroom? Why is she
Why can't I drink from it?
Yeah. Don't put that near your mouth.
That was my favorite scene, by the way, the lota. I was like, yes.
Thank you. Well, and some of that is just like, it's so true to world that not including it would feel like I was dumbing it, making it for a white audience. Including it feels relatable and funny, so it's almost like claiming the thing that used to hurt us, that we used to be made fun of. And I'm like, oh my God, I love lotas, I'm like, we're so clean. No matter what else you think of us, we're like, we have great hygiene. So it's also claiming those moments so that they're just there. And I think what, over the years, and again, it comes back to my own sort of personal growth as a person, I care a lot less about whether an audience gets everything or not, because I have grown up my whole life, growing up in small white town, Sydney, Nova Scotia. I didn't get everything. And I was expected to just, there'd be gaps, and that was okay. It was fine. Oh, you don't celebrate this? Well, that's fine. You'll just sit in the corner. Oh, you don't read the Bible with us, which we do once a week? You're going to sit in the hallway. Like, there are things that we have all, as people of color, as Asian folks, as immigrants, we've had to just fill in the blanks or just deal with it. And it's okay if people don't get everything. What is your story about?
And I've had experiences like that in Pakistan. Like, I remember when I moved back to Pakistan after high school, and I spent a year of high school over here, and we were all working on a project together, and I was told, this is not okay. You can't have the boys and girls sitting together and working on this project. And being approached by a teacher and being told that, we're not encouraging this, and we have to make sure that you guys all work separately. And I'm like, we're like 15 years old and we're making a poster? Like, why is this not okay? And just not really understanding that. So, you know, I think, again, what like cinema comes back to, and within Flames, really talking about, you know, the universal experience of a society that can be oppressive, and people who find themselves on the margins of that society, and how they're able to survive.
I love that. I love how you mentioned filling in the gaps and that we don't need to do that to give context. That's beautiful. Has filmmaking been a way for both of you to reconnect with your roots or identity, and was this something that you consciously set out to do when you embarked on your films, or has filmmaking helped you connect to your roots in a way that you didn't expect?
I mean, if you've seen The Queen of My Dreams or know my work at all, I'm obsessed with my mother. I'm obsessed with understanding who she is, and I'm also obsessed with understanding where she came from. I do feel a deep draw to the land. I feel, God, I get emotional. Like, I feel those fissures of the colonizer and what happened to us and what could have been. And so I can't change all of that, but maybe I can change something within myself. So I'm obsessed with the history, and I'm obsessed with like the relationships that are impacted by the history. So yeah, I mean, the motherland has been fascinating to me. I didn't say always, because I stopped myself from saying always, because there were times I was like, ugh, we're in Pakistan for the summer again. I'm gonna almost get malaria. You know, it's like it's, or the bathrooms. Yeah, sometimes, I know, great hygiene, but sometimes awkward bathrooms. But I really, again, coming back to the journey of self, which is a very Western thing about like centering the I. I think my journey has been how to make sense of the I need to know that I was part of a we. And bringing the we into the now is, I don't know, I think it's the thing that's going to save us.
For me, I remember graduating. I did a theater undergraduate degree, and I remember like as soon as obviously.
I feel like everybody who lived in Pakistan did theater, like so did I.
Yeah,
there was no film.
Well, all of us did. I mean, that's why I was at your show and you were touring.
Where's Deanna? See, Deanna, I told you.
But I remember I was like volunteering at Kingston Canadian Film Festival, and they did like a speed dating, and I got to meet Richie Mehta. And he's a great guy. He made Delhi Crime, which was this huge Netflix series for South Asia. And remember at the time, you know, the landscape of Canadian cinema, yes, we had Clement Virgo, and we had like Egoyan, but those really weren't the films that were breaking through the noise. And Richie was like, get out, leave. And I'm like, you know, like I can see that because everyone kept asking me if I'm interested in telling the story, what version of the immigrant story I'm gonna tell. So I'm like, I'm already telling an immigrant story, you know, like immigrant is a part of my identity, but it's not the all-encompassing version of it. So I actively decided to develop my cinema in Karachi, the city I was born in. And in a lot of ways, I'm obsessed with Karachi because I think it's like the perfect microcosm of a society. You know, it's a melting pot. It's where everyone in Pakistan comes to achieve their dreams and achieve their goals. And it's 20 million people in a very complex, like contained, very hot city. And I found it to be a place where I was able to tell stories. And tell stories in a way where there was a great amount of freedom for me to use whatever aspect of my identity I was interested in exploring. So, you know, 10 years over there culminated in Flames, which really, for a lot of people, they tell me it's like all of my shorts combined in one movie. But it allowed me to also really come to terms with what my immigrant story looks like.
That was a very loaded response. I can really feel a lot of like similarities. I mean, I work in film as well, I'm Pakistani as well. I really resonate with what both of you said. Could you both share your perspectives on the distinction between, I hate this word, a place of origin and home in your filmmaking, and how do you approach representing the places that you come from? And does it come from a more personal place, or is it more imaginative, especially considering the complexities of diasporic identities? And I'll leave that off with an example. When I finished producing Concrete Valley, and it was watched by various members from the Syrian community, and for those of you who don't know, Concrete Valley was all real Syrian immigrants from the immigrant community. So they were, and it was about their own lives, so they would just play versions of themselves in the film, and we thought we were being very authentic to the experience, because what's more authentic than having people play themselves in a film about their own lives? But we were approached afterwards by members of the community who said, well, oh, there was a kissing scene in the film, and like, that's just so not like, Syrians don't do that. And we had to remind ourselves that, not all Syrian Muslims are conservative, not all of them are liberal. So there's these different types of identities that you portray in films, and is that something for both of you that came from a personal space? Did it come from an imaginative space? I mean, I kind of know the answer already, Fawzia. You gave it away already. But if you could elaborate on that, and then of course the distinction between place of origin and home.
I mean, I think, I feel like whether it's The Queen of My Dreams or something that I direct that someone else wrote, everything I do will come from a personal place, because that's really my power. I think it's all of our power, whether it's emotion or experience or POV. So, Queen of My Dreams seemingly is autobiographical, but it's fantasy. There are many pieces of the film that are inspired by things that happened in my family or in my life or me, or the character has all these qualities. My dad did die quite suddenly and I had to go to Pakistan for the burial, but so much of it is made up to answer these questions that I have, or to get to the place of reconciliation that I don't have. So that's the personal, right? And I think there's power in the personal. Home for me is where my wife is, wherever that is. So that's going to be my home for the rest of my life on this earth. I think home has shifted. I think now when I reflect back on life, I'm like, well, Sydney really, the Cape Breton really impacted and shaped me for these 10 years. But then I really came of age in Chicago when my family moved to the US. I mean, I came out, I was an attorney who then came out as an actor. I know, it was such a disappointment to my parents for being an actor. They were like, what did you do? You're wasting your life. And then I came out as queer, and they were like, wait a minute, we didn't think it could get worse. And so that Chicago is a place where I really had to struggle and leave careers and start over again, leave relationships and friendships and start again, like have all the heartache in the world happen to me there. So maybe that's home. Pakistan, I think it's a home. I dream of the motherland being my land, but when I went to do my play and performed in Karachi and Lahore and Islamabad, I was just reminded of like my privilege. Like, I'm not from there. I'm a Pakistani who is an outsider, and I can't take my values and just be like, why aren't things like this? That's my, Western voice of myself. But like, that's like deeply, it's problematic and privileged to think that the way you live and exist here should just be that way anywhere else in the world. And I remember also I made a short film there called Saya, which means shadow.
Beautiful film.
Thank you. With Anam Abbas, who produced In Flames, who's an EP on our film. We clearly love each other. And in that, I was working with some Karachi theater actors, and there was a scene where I wanted these two women to kiss, and one of the actresses was like, Fawzia, I can't do that. I have to live here and feel safe here. And again, I was reminded just of my privilege, and of course that made sense to me. So we just made it differently. And it was not less powerful, it was more powerful. So when I, so it's like maybe that is a home, but I'm not, I'm always deeply cognizant of being an outsider because of these things I walk in with.
I mean, that's something I can really relate with, the constant outsider syndrome, which is great. I think it works as filmmakers.
Yeah.
I think it helps us find our outside way in our stories.
I feel like that's why we're filmmakers.
Yeah, you know.
It's connecting, trying to find
And wanting
ourselves.
to create that representation when we didn't see it maybe growing up. For me, Place of Origin sounds like a government-like document. You know,
Place of
like, what's it
origin.
say? And yeah, I agree with Fawzia. Home is where your family is. My family's been on the move for like the last 100 years, you know, and I'm on the move every 5 years. So, you know, I don't like sticking around in one place for too long. But yeah, it's where your family is, you know, and that, especially in the world that we're living now, I mean, like nationhood is maybe 80 years old, and we're seeing that it's problematic, you know? So let's see where the next 100 years takes us.
Yeah.
I mean, this wasn't one of the questions, but like I've always felt so alienated in my own experience, and I'm sure other people have felt the same way, but I classically just, I felt like an outsider when I moved back to Pakistan when I was 11. I knew I was not the same, and I wanted to be the same as the rest of them, and I think that this feeling is so overwhelming, especially when you're teenagers and you're going through all sorts of crazy hormones and you're really trying to fit in, and fitting in Pakistan is like insanely difficult. Because there's so much like criteria that you have to fill in, so many boxes that you have to check. Do you think that, you know, at least for me, I remember going in F7 Marca's like downstairs into like the bootleg, like pirated DVD shop to watch films and feeling like,
Great shot.
you know,
That's right, Titanic DVD.
watching American Beauty for the first time, because they wouldn't air, just for context, they wouldn't air anything like this on TV. Like you could not see foreign films. They would maybe throw on Pirates of the Caribbean and like, you know, censor all of the scenes which involved like, you know, a man and a woman kissing.
But also, I grew up watching Baywatch in Pakistan, which was one of the English language shows we used to get. Baywatch and The Simpsons. Uncensored.
I don't know how that happened. I could not watch Baywatch wherever I was in Islamabad. They probably just didn't
Classic Islamabad.
have it streaming there. It was awful. But I remember feeling for the first time in my life like, wow, this, whatever this is, like, this is what it feels like to be me. And I finally feel understood. And maybe in some way, shape, or form, although I didn't know that yet, that was what drew me to filmmaking, because I felt that it taught me something about myself and something about life. And maybe it stemmed from a need to want to connect to other human beings because I couldn't connect to my own kind. Is there, like, do you have similar feelings? Like, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I mean, I do just want to talk about Baywatch for a second. There was a Baywatch line in The Queen of My Dreams, and it didn't kind of work out just because the line was like half done, and it just didn't work in the edit. But I remember going to Pakistan, and like the joke was that, you know, this is haram, but then everyone's saying haram while watching Baywatch. You know, and it's like there's imams just being like, so haram, don't change the channel.
It was family viewing for
Yeah.
us. We would watch it together.
I feel left out.
Yeah, truly. I
I
mean,
never got to watch Baywatch there.
100%. I've actually been thinking about doing a rewatch after we were talking to somebody about it. It might hold up. You never know. But what was the question? Oh, in terms of connection. I mean, my whole sort of foray into filmmaking as a former lawyer turned actor is trying to connect to identity and self. Lack of, you know, I said this, you know, for those who were at the screening last night, I mean, I didn't see queer Muslims, and I didn't know we could exist. And it was before there was, you know, a TikTok that you could go to and be like, man, there we are, we're so fun, you know? And so I was like, is this possible? Like, I just didn't know, and I really didn't have anybody to talk to about it. So the connection was real, and it was through making my first short film that I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm connecting to self, and then found there to be audiences who also saw themselves in that. So the origin of, for me, to filmmaking is connection to community, to self and community.
Yeah, I echo that. I think for me, the connection wasn't initially for the audience, but as I said, I've come from theater, so I set up my first theater company when I was like 15, and it's the same name as my film company now. But what I enjoyed about the connection was like a theater world, you create this whole world and community when you're putting up a production, and I found an extension of that in film. And those would end up being the people that would be like my people. Like that's how I built my community in Karachi. Because when I moved back there, most of the people I know were actively moving away. So I was like, I don't know anyone here, how am I gonna meet people? So I did a play. So it was like, how do I build connection with other artists? And that was what initially drew me to directing as a craft, because I really loved the craft of it. And that was kind of, and I only ended up getting to film because what used to drive me mad about theater was how it would just end when the curtains would close. And then if you've ever seen like a theater video, they're awful. It's like the worst representation of what that feels like. So what I like about film, and if I was a true theater artist, what I would love about theater is it's like ephemeral nature where it finishes and that was it. And with film it lives on forever, and I'm like, that's what I actually want. So that's kind of the kind of connection I was looking for, was with other creatives, less so with the audience.
What's your company name?
City Lights.
City Lights.
Hey, 14 years old.
Yes.
My first role in theater was Hedwig in the Harry Potter play in Pakistan when I was 13.
Different Hedwig than I was thinking of.
Yeah, no, I was the owl. That was my first role.
I mean, I want you to know that I see you, and my first role was as Cobweb in, oh my gosh, Midsummer Night's Dream, and one of my 3 lines was saying, Cobweb. I was so proud.
I was the Mad Hatter, and I stand by that.
Oh my god.
I think we all need to be on a podcast. Next question.
In costume.
Yeah, Hedwig, what about you? What would you be?
I played the Mad Hatter. That was my first role.
Yeah.
That's my favorite, by the way. I have those Mad Hatter lines posted all over my office. Both Queen of My Dreams and In Flames are your first features. And I've seen most of your prior short films, both of yours. And I think almost all of them explore themes from your culture or roots. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Do you always see yourself exploring similar themes in the future? And are there other aspects of home or culture and identity that you'd like to explore in your future work?
I mean, look, if somebody came to me tomorrow and said, you must direct the next Fast and the Furious. Yeah, I'm gonna say yes. It'll be like Fast and the Furious 20,
But is it going to be Fast and the Furious with
Karachi.
brown folks? In Karachi. My father's 76 Toyota Corolla, which still works, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things for me about POV and perspective, or, is also about, like, casting, for example. There's an opportunity to cast folks who are incredible but might get passed up, and whether that's a South Asian actor, a Muslim actor, an East Asian actor, like there's so many, non-binary actor, a trans actor, like there's so many folks who, to me, that's still centering my mission just based on who is cast or who's behind the camera or who's the composer or whatever it is. Like, so in that respect, yes. That is the mission. Yeah, I mean, like, I want to make a horror film that's, like, inspired by, a lot of those, sort of that Muslim mysticism.
And I want to make comedies. We should trade scripts.
Yes, if you've written one, give me, and I'll share. You heard it here first.
Let's go.
Where's Telefilm?
I'm going to call up Peggy.
Yeah.
What was Roots?
I mean, the whole thing is about home and roots. Do you think you're going to be exploring similar themes in the future that relate to home, identity, culture, and are there other aspects of home that you wish to explore further?
I definitely, like the next project I'm developing is partially set in Pakistan, and the rest will be set in some small town Canada. I think, like we all said earlier, home is what you carry with you, and how that keeps changing as we evolve as people and as we evolve as artists will inform the stories that we decide to explore. I love what you're saying about like big blockbusters behind the camera, because what I'm really enjoying is seeing the change in those big blockbusters when it is people of color who are casting those lead roles. Like, I love the new Scream, which was like two Latinx sisters, and how that changed that like legacy institution. So I think there's a lot of excitement about, you know, what cinema can do, even when it's like a James Cameron movie, you know, or a Wes Anderson film. Although that would, let's see. But yeah, same. You know, I think all of us just want a bigger toolbox to play in and to bring our particular POV in. But I do think it all has to come from like top down. And I've seen it when, you know, there's people of color in charge, when there's women in charge. And there's such a long way to go.
Well put. Now this is a bit of a loaded question, kind of nervous to ask it. I don't know the answer to this question. That's why I'm asking you. I'm putting you guys on the spot. Can you speak about the difference between films made by Pakistani diaspora, like yourselves, versus...
Whoa, like yourselves?
Like ourselves. I did address this prior to the fact. We don't like that word, but I don't know how else to refer to it. Versus, you know, Pakistanis that have been born in Pakistan, never left Pakistan, haven't been exposed to the influence of like cinema outside of there, or just, you know, having lived abroad. Why do you think that we see so many more films by Pakistani diasporic filmmakers do so well in festivals, whereas films like, let's say, Zindagi Tamasha or other like local Pakistani films like rarely ever see the light of day?
I have like a whole lecture here.
Please enlighten me.
Well, for one thing, I don't know, like, cinema is so global now, and like people in Pakistan have Netflix, it's one of the regions it's launched in. So for you not to be exposed to global cinema, you would like actively need to be like hiding under a rock with no internet. You know what I mean? More
like in the film festival scope. Because yeah, on Netflix you can go and watch.
Exactly. And like you're seeing that also in the way that like local Pakistani films are now coming out, where you can see a lot of Western influence and less Bollywood. With a film like Zindagi Tamasha, like I had the privilege of championing that film when I was on the Oscar committee for that year. And that film did really well. What are you saying? Like, it like won the Kin Jisiok Award in Busan. It got a standing ovation over there. It was banned in Pakistan, given, you know, the censor nation, the censor committee, and I'm not going to get into that because that's a separate conversation that I'm dealing with. But I also think it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, where like an artist's sensibilities also inform the audience. And like I know Sarmit, the director of Zindagi Tamasha, and I know where his sensibilities lie, versus a film like Joyland, where the director, you know, studied at a foreign university and then went back. We're seeing a lot of that, where they're kind of influenced culturally by like the West or by Europe, and then they're bringing that back and creating cinema that is traveling extremely well. So I think right now is a really interesting time for Pakistani cinema because it's on the map. You know, we have 3 Pakistani filmmakers sitting here, and it's exciting because, you know, we, like 10 years ago, had no cinemas and 1 film a year. So the fact that we've had, you know, 2 films at Cannes 2 years in a row, the fact that you were at BFI, like, the industry is in infancy, but it's flourishing off the back of international cinema. So that, because there's no local funds, because the arts are not encouraged back home, you know, we need international approaches to help sustain that industry. Because locally, like, I used to watch every Pakistani film that was being released. Their budgets are nothing, the films are not screening, and there's no film education. So if you have resources, if you're in a place of privilege where we have these dual passports, the onus is on us to invest in those resources. And that's my speech.
And I think there is a privilege. I mean, again, it's like I can make this movie and go to Pakistan and then I leave, you know, and so I don't have to, and I've already dealt with all the community and family stuff, so I don't, everybody, you know, I've gotten all the death threats for 15 years. Like, that's just being, that's a day in the life, you know, and so it's a privilege to have the funding access. It's a privilege to be able to go make it. I also think that I think it's a universal truth that we're also products of our culture. So if you're living in, let's say, Pakistan, you are like, well, what's the thing I can make? And if you don't have these other privileges, like going to school at NYU, like, oh my gosh, Saim did.
I also did not go to school in NYU.
Yeah, not you, sorry. I meant Saim went to school, the director of Joyland. But like, and then go back, you know, I mean, that's the best film school in the world, right? One of them. And so that's a different kind of privilege. And I don't say that to slam him. I think we just all, that gives us perspective, you know? And so if you're a regular person in Pakistan thinking, I want to make a movie, who's going to fund it? The person who's going to fund it expects you to make a movie a certain kind of way. Yeah. And they expect a certain kind of film with a certain kind of story, and it's not going to take the risks, and it's going to meet the basic standard. And not saying that's Zindagi Tamasha, but no, there's no but. Not saying that's Zindagi Tamasha. I think that's just the truth of film culture globally. In Canada as well, when you are sort of born into this film culture, you see, okay, well, this is the kind of thing that gets funded, so therefore I should make that kind of film, and that's what will get funded, and you're scared to take risks because you don't want to risk the funding, and you want to keep climbing up and making. So, you know, that is true in this culture as well, and it's something that, again, I'm sort of like I feel privileged to say, okay, I'm going to take your money and I'm going to do this weird thing, you know, and do whatever I want, kind of thing. But I think that's partially a privilege of mine.
I mean, off that, I also think that like the arts are a hugely privileged space,
yeah,
like across the board, and we see that like more so when, you know, you're at like an international festival, you're like, oh wow, you guys all went to the same school, you know. But we are so privileged being in Canada, yeah, because, like, you know, after France, we have the most public funds to create films, to go out and make whatever kind of film you want to make, and with very few strings attached, which was really alarming to me. Because I'd worked in the Pakistan space, yeah, where I was dealing with producers who were like, not this plot, not that, you know what I mean? And yeah, having to navigate that. So I do think, right off what Fawzia says, you know, like, a lot of artists back home are trying to create art that is sustainable in the way that what sustainability means for them. But that's absolutely not the case with Zindagi Tamasha, which is a beautiful film, and it's on YouTube, so if anyone wants to seek it out, please do.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an absolutely beautiful film, and I think one of the reasons why I asked this question was because I was surprised that I didn't see it at like BFI or TIFF, or I don't know, other major A-list festivals, because I was like, wow, this movie is it feels like a bit of a hidden gem. Like, I watch it on YouTube. I actually didn't know that it was at Busan.
It was huge in Asia. It got a really good play.
And that's why, you know, it led me to ask this question, because I was like, what is the difference between, is it literally just because like we are diaspora? Is it because we've been exposed to, I don't know, networks outside of being in Asia? Like, what is, I think like privilege plays a huge part in it. And it was actually Carol. So Carol line produced, she line produced Zarrar's film. And I had this discussion with her during TIFF when we met. And she was really frustrated that being, you know, someone who lives and works in Pakistan, that these similar opportunities don't present themselves to her. And other filmmakers that I speak to in Pakistan, they frequently reach out to me and say, hey, well, like, I want to do this and I want to make this film, and it's a great idea, but like, I'm having so much trouble being recognized by folks in the West. And I don't think that there's one specific answer for this, but I think privilege plays a large part in it. And what I think is that films like your films are going to do art, that they're going to create more space for filmmakers in Pakistan who don't have the opportunities that we have to be able to make cinema about our home and our identities from this different space than those filmmakers do.
I mean, 100%. I mean, like, you said this, Zarrar, and you said this as well, like, that we are creating space. And also, I mean, racism is real, right? I mean, and I say that not just as like some idea. It's like, I know when we were getting, I love talking about this, our insurance to film in Pakistan, it was impossible to get insurance to film in Pakistan. And everyone's like, yeah, but there's floods. And I was like, I live in Los Angeles. Do you know what happens there? There's fires constantly, like there's murders. There's gun violence all over the United States, but you will insure any movie there. And, how many filmmakers are in the room? Raise your hands. Okay, right? So it's like, to make a feature film, you need insurance. You can't make it without insurance. To keep your funding, to use your funding, you need that. It is a gate-kept space. And so they decide that, oh, well, this is dangerous and this is not. Pakistan is dangerous when it comes to insurance. It's racism. Because when it's like, okay, well, how hard, what people will ask, well, how hard was it to shoot them? Like, of course it had challenges, but like, you could have those challenges in Hamilton, Ontario. You know what I mean? Like, every day on set is a fucking challenge, And so I think there are, that racism is at many, it just appears and rears its sort of ugly big head in many, many ways.
Time for a quick bonus question, and then we're going to get into the Q&As. How do you think tools like production design, character, costumes, genre filmmaking, and language can be used to embody the theme of home beyond just setting, like beyond just having a film being shot in Pakistan? Like, what narrative strategies do you think you could utilize to highlight a specific geographic, cultural, or political context?
I mean, we're all using the tools to the best that we can because home is so baked into both of our films. For me, like, I remember we did a drive around the city and I was looking at the colors of the city, which are like green, pink, and yellow, and being like, this is the color palette of my movie. And that was the wardrobe. That was the colors of the apartment. That was the color grading, because I wanted the city to be baked into every frame you saw. And I think that reflects really well with the audience, because I remember one of the reviews we got was like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna go to Karachi, but I feel like the filmmakers spoke to the essence of the city. And I mean, that's, again, what I said earlier, that's what I hope good cinema does. It allows you to travel through the screen. And I think when you're able to communicate that essence, and what genre specifically does, is it also allows the audience inroads into stories in a way that they might not engage with. And we also really benefited. In Flames is released theatrical in Pakistan, and we've cleared the censor board, and we're now going wide into 2 other cities. The response has been really positive.
That's fantastic, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. And
that is a big deal for those of you who may not be aware.
So we cleared the censor board in a state that's notoriously conservative and has not traditionally allowed films that are speaking to the issues that our film is speaking about screen. And we hugely benefited being a genre film, because I just know that they're like, oh, this is another ghost story. They're like, we'll let them watch this. So I think that's what genre filmmaking does. It allows you to speak to issues, and this is what it's historically done as well, with the queer coding of like characters from early Hollywood cinema. It allows you to tell stories and to speak truth to power without power realizing.
Great answer. Fawzia?
I don't know if I have anything else to say. I mean, you know, it was really important for us to film in Karachi because I don't think we could afford to create Karachi anywhere else. And a lot of people really, you know, people suggested filming, you know, Thailand for Karachi or Turkey for Karachi, and that's, you know, two common places used for Asian countries like Pakistan. But Karachi is so specific to me in my experience of it that it felt like there could be nowhere else to go. And it does feel like a form of, you know, what are we doing here if we're not changing something? And so by changing something, it's like, let's be in the place that people say you shouldn't go there and film. So home and location was essential. And like the home, the literal home structure, it just doesn't look like that anywhere else to me, in my experience. And we needed that. Like, and of course, when you just think of in the nuts and bolts of it all, you know, to even access the clothes and the dishware and the, you know, we had 3 time periods in the film, much less 3 time periods of production design, but just even 1 period of production design. It is not possible to have such incredible access. And, you know, for me, like, of course, like production design in Pakistan includes everything: the hair, the makeup, the wardrobe, and of course the art. But that wardrobe is being sewn on set by a tailor who's, you know, just bringing their magic. Like that is home. And so the experience of making that film felt as beautiful as what I hope the experience of watching the film is.
That's so true. I can spot a film that hasn't been shot in Pakistan, but pretends it is as if it has been shot in Pakistan from a mile away.
It's wearing like a costume.
Exactly.
I think we all know what we're talking about here.
And with that, I think I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. So I'll ask you to be loud, and then I'm going to repeat your question right over there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation about diaspora, whether you like the word or not, in context and in context for, let's call it, international audiences. But I'd like Fawzia and Zarrar to rethink it as, rethink the question as, you are both international filmmakers. We would not expect Koreeda, for example, to contextualize Japan for a non-Japanese audience. If you think of yourselves not as Canadian or hyphenated Canadian filmmakers, but as Pakistani filmmakers making Pakistani stories in your films, do you really need to contextualize for an audience? I mean, you said, Zarrar, cinema is global now. Do you need to think about that? Because there are young filmmakers here, and you know, I would hate for them, for their next film, to have to be thinking, oh, but you know, people aren't going to get this. I need to explain this in a 3-minute expository piece, and that will ruin the film. So, as international filmmakers, do you need to?
So the question was, in a very short sentence, excuse me if I'm getting it wrong, do you as international filmmakers feel like you need to contextualize your films for a larger audience?
I think it's really interesting that you also chose Koreeda because he's a filmmaker who has an incredible international presence, but he also does pretty well in Japan. You know, because he's telling stories that are both local and from local become universal. That being said, if in North America, some of the films that are extremely successful over here, it really just comes down to like what is the lens that we're viewing the story through? Because if it's a lens that centers or is explaining to white audiences, which is hot take here for me, past lives, it will do really well for the audience that is maybe the intended audience, because that's maybe also inspired by the experiences of the creator. I think it comes down to sensibilities. and what cinema raised you and what cinema you want to create. That's my take on that. But I also love past lives.
And I think that, like, I love your answer, Zarrar, and I think that I can speak to the fact that I think the Queen of My Dreams benefited from not having a huge studio or executive producers who were saying, can you explain this to the audience? They're not going to understand that. I felt very fortunate that our funders, you know, of course they have notes as they do. My hot take is I love notes. I know that's gross, but I do because I think there's always something you can glean from them, even if it's not literal. And sometimes you just need to hear the note. You don't always have to apply the note. But you know, they gave notes and I understood them, I saw them, but they weren't asking me to do that. They weren't asking me to explain things. And when they did, I was ready with an answer as to why not. And I think that's something we can do, is be prepared, be undeniable, know who you are and know why. If you have those answers, when the question comes, you won't be surprised by it and then crumble into it. And I think that is a benefit of creating here in this system. In the studio system in the United States, sometimes there are just executives that it's your movie and it's their movie first, which is a reality that happens. And you know, I can't speak to that particular film, but that is a truth in a lot of work that we see that's quite commercial and popular and wins awards.
So I do not like notes, but I will grudgingly take them and sit with them and then eventually put them in. But this reminds me of a note that we got on the script of In Flames from a producer that we were looking at collaborating with, where they're like, this story is not local enough, it could be set anywhere, you know? Like, and I'm like, well, that's the point. It's a story about a mother and daughter trying to navigate an oppressive society. We have oppressive societies everywhere, and we have mothers and daughters everywhere. So it doesn't need to be local because it intrinsically is. And that's where it's like finding collaborators who will support your journey. And I remember when me and my producer, Antoine Bourges, got this note, we're like, okay, never mind. You know, like, these are not people that we can bring in to this story. Yeah. And that's something that I've seen you do, Fawzia, with the team that you put together. And that's also why our teams are basically the same people, give or take like one or two people.
We love each other.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting you say that. To add to the essence of the question, essentially, it's a testament to both of your skills as filmmakers that you've made very universal films. You know, one deals with an oppressive community, like you can feel oppressed no matter where you are in the world. Another deals with, you know, identity and trying to come to terms with who you really are, and as well as your past and family. And I think, you know, what I was trying to get at when I asked the initial question earlier on in the panel was that, you know, I recently came across the work of a filmmaker who pitched her feature to me, and I was just floored. A South Asian Indian Muslim filmmaker. The themes that she tackles in her work were very social culturally specific, but like, man, I had never seen something that excited me this much. But I wondered why, even though she had such a strong body of work, that she didn't receive the international recognition that I thought that she should have. And I realized that because her work was so culturally specific that unless you were South Asian and unless you were maybe a South Asian Muslim, you would not understand what that film was about. And that has led me to continually question, you know, so I want to say it wasn't universal to the experience of everyone. It was only really universal to the experience of South Asians. So that's what really led me to question this, and that's why I really wanted to hear from other filmmakers about their experience with this specific issue. Any more questions? Right over there.
I'll try to be loud. So I was wondering about the writing and sort of taking the writing into production, and whether you had any considerations or choices that you made during that process.
So the question is, they were wondering about the writing and if you took any of that into considerations when you were going into production or anything else.
I think, I don't know why, but I was like going in, like I knew we wouldn't have a lot of money. Like I knew that when we were writing, because I'm like, I'm a first-time filmmaker. Most of my work is coming out of Pakistan. You know, like it's unlikely I'm gonna get like $1 million. You know, so it was knowing that I was gonna have really limited resources, but knowing that I had the benefit of working in a city for 10 years and having really strong relationships that I built in that space. So writing in scenes that allowed me to use what I had to tell a story that was visually exciting, you know, and like baking in locations that I love, but are also like stunningly beautiful and free, you know, and centering fewer locations, fewer characters, but doing it in a way that it never felt that way. So my writing was more like how do I tell this story within the means that I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get, and we landed there, you know, like we're the first film from the micro budget program to be at Cannes, which I don't know if is a win, but you know, I'll take it.
That's a win. What are you talking about?
But yeah, I mean, I also put on my producer hat a lot, and I'm like, especially when I'm working with young writers, I'm like, write the story that you can tell. So don't like write a sci-fi with 200 people, you know, and like period costumes for your first short film, because you're gonna be let down. But if you can tell a great conflict with 2 people in a room, then maybe you'll get to 2,000 aliens.
I mean, I think the journey has been quite circuitous. You know, 2017, when I started writing this, I had this play, that was the beginnings of it. I made a feature that was at South by Southwest that year that I didn't direct, that I was a writer on and that I starred in. And I think I was just thinking, I wasn't really thinking, period. In my short films, I was always thinking about what do you have? You have this room, you have this green bench, you have 3 microphones, what's the movie you can make here with that? Like that's how I would write the shorts. The features, for some reason, they were kind of, they did have a bit of a life of their own, almost like, well, I have to tell a story here. So because the play, you know, it was like 99% personal, called Me, My Mom, and Sharmila, the adaptation of that could have gone any number of ways, and for a while it did. I think that process was, you know, at first I did a crowdfunding to work with a co-writer, and then, you know, we had different visions, and then she went off to make a movie, so then I was writing, I worked with a script consultant, and then the writer and I separated ways because we were just different kinds of storytellers, and we love each other, we're fine. And then what I was trying to figure out is like, what am I doing? Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I didn't go to school for this. Yes, I made a feature already, but this was the first time I was doing it on my own. And I decided to think about what is the part of this story I'm not willing to sacrifice. And that was 1969 Karachi, Pakistan, which made it difficult because that is period, that is a different country. It would have been much easier for me to write 1989 Sydney, Nova Scotia, Canada, and make a 90-minute movie of that. We know we can get that funded in Canada, right? Easy, 1 city, 1 crew, 1 place, 1 time period. But it's not what I wanted to do for this movie. And maybe if I were to sit down and think about it, really intellectually, I would say that should be my 4th or 5th film. But I didn't, because I'm a Pisces. And yes, thank you, Pisces, love. I'm moved by my emotions and romance and fantasy and dreams. And also, I happened to find collaborators who said, wow, this sounds great, let's do this, which include my wife and then my crazy-ass producers, Jason and Mark from Nova Scotia, who are not Pakistani. But they were like, this makes sense. And so that writing process, it really it is not the same movie I started with. At one point, I had 3 timelines. One of them had Sharmila Tagore in her journey from the 60s in it.
I want to see that movie.
I do too. I mean, she fell in love with this incredible Muslim cricket player who's also a prince, you know, I mean. But eventually it was like, how do I tell pieces of this? And I refused to let go of this piece of this. And up until we were filming, it was being edited and changed. When we were on the ground, I mean, I changed 2 pivotal scenes that I think make the film make sense a week before we shot those scenes. And I think for me, that awareness of don't get stuck in the thing you thought you had to do. If it's not working, listen to your gut, change it. Don't hold on to the ego about it. It's okay, you're probably right. Your gut is probably right. It's not gonna make sense, it's not gonna work. My DP is here, he had to deal with that. Farjad, our first AD, is here.
Our first AD.
Yeah, he had to deal with all of this.
I can't believe you cut out 2 scenes a week before. That's wow. Okay.
Rewrote them to be something else, to bolster the story. Yeah.
Okay.
What?
I'll tell you over noodles. I see them somewhere.
And I think we've hit time.